Greetings, Ohio Valley. This is Dan Lima with OSU Extension from Belmont County.
And this is Karen Cox from WVU Extension in Ohio County. Thanks for tuning in to Extension Calling, your source for research-based information for the farm, garden, and home. Hey, we just wanted to say thank you to everyone who has sent us an evaluation. That information is so very important. We are still looking for feedback from our listeners. So if there's a show that you've listened to that has really helped you, then please feel free to go ahead and fill out that evaluation again and just let us know how you're using the information for the show.
Yeah, let us know how our show is helping you, whether it's a major thing, whether it's a little gold nugget you're able to get out of it. We try to mix a lot of our experiences with the show and just want to know how it helps you out.
You can fill out these evaluations as many times as you want. And also, you can use those evaluations to tell us if there's a topic that you would like us to address. So we do welcome that. And we're always looking for new ideas on things that you feel are important. So let us know what you want to learn from our show. You can find the evaluation online at https://bit.ly extension calling evaluation. And that is https://bit.ly, so that's bit.ly, extension calling evaluation. And extension calling and evaluation all need to be capitalized, but those are the only caps you need to worry about. Or you can just call us at the office. You can reach me at 304-234-3673. That's 304-234-3673.
And you can also contact me at 740-695-1455. That's 740-695-1455.
Hey, Dan.
Hello, Karen.
We are back again.
That's right. And the weather is crazy as always. It's every week crazy.
Cold, hot, cold, hot.
I know. You know, it's even worse with the greenhouse.
Oh, I can imagine. Yeah. And the high tunnels too.
I'm like, I know it's 20 degrees out, but the sun's shining and the greenhouse is doing its effects. And it just gets so hot, like 80 degrees. And I'm like, nothing I can do.
Well, but you have an automatic opener, right?
Yeah, but that only does so much, you know?
Yeah.
Here's the worst part. When the winds are beating down, you got to be careful with those ventilation panels, because you don't want them to start pulling on, you know, the gears and the motor, and then you have to readjust them. And
the wind speed has been crazy. And yeah, I wonder how many high tunnels are getting damaged from these high winds.
I know.
Well, something that I want to celebrate. We are now officially a Tree City, USA. Woo!
Tree City, USA. Didn't the Beach Boys have a song about that?
No, not quite. But no, Tree City USA is a national program that is designed to reward communities that are working towards improving their tree health and tree canopy cover. And we have just, after years of trying, gotten enough support under our belts to get that qualification, or that award, I guess. It's kind of like an award, but it's more like a certification saying that we're doing our part. And, you know, the reasons for becoming a tree city, if your city is or isn't a tree city and you want to know more about it, you can go to the arborday.org website and find more about Tree City USA. But it's mostly something that's supposed to give a public demonstration to your commitment to the environment and to the trees in your community, to build pride in your community, make your community more attractive, help you to absorb traffic sounds, improve the temperatures on the ground, so maybe remediate some of that severe temperature change and shifting. but also, reducing your energy costs by improving shade and blocking winds. And, trees can also improve your property values, increase shopping, and there's all sorts of great things that trees can do. But trees don't only do good things. There are challenges associated with trees. They're expensive to maintain in a proper manner. Just getting the cheapest person to come in and shave it into a lollipop shape is absolutely not the right way to treat a tree. And so the city of Wheeling, we have some policies on the books saying that we're not going to do that anymore in our public areas. Now, what people do on their own private property is their own private business. We don't have any control over that, but we are trying to educate people and reach out into the community and help to improve everyone's awareness.
Trees do add a lot of character. They make things look cleaner. It's just nicer to see. They add a lot to a city for sure. And it's a really good thing that you're doing with Wheeling, Karen. And the expectations are high that it's going to look amazing. And let's hope that comes true. And I have high hopes that it will.
Well, thank you. I have high hopes too. And so little by little, we're getting there. We're working on improving our place and good things to come.
That's right. And speaking of things to come, the Belmont County Master Gardeners do a plant swap every year. This year, it'll be May 8th, which is a Wednesday. It's going to be at the fairgrounds. And it's just a fun activity where people can divide their plants. You basically bring something new that you're going to share with people. We would like them in pots. So you can bring one, you can bring more. It gets categorized by the master gardeners, and you pick something new for how many plants you've brought. So if you bring in four things to share with the community, you get 4 chances of taking something else home. So it could be flowers, veggies, herbs, trees, shrubs.
But it is a swap. It is not a sale. You have to bring something to get something.
Absolutely. Yes. And if you just bring, one thing, you just kind of want to see it, you'll get to go once and get something new. So just because somebody's bringing 10 items doesn't mean that you can't come with one. And, you might find something that you really like, or something that maybe it's a little bit hard to find, but the master gardeners are going to be there to answer your questions, to help you out. You'll have the right people there to talk about maintenance, as far as upkeep goes, when to plant things. It's just going to be a whole lot of fun. Not as prestigious as Tree City, but still a very fun part of the community. Oh, and one other thing. We have a rule that you can't bring invasives.
Awesome.
So if you're not sure, we will tell you. Not to say, we're not gonna like call you out or anything, but sometimes it happens, and you're just not aware that something you're bringing is in the invasives category. Most invasives actually had a use at some point, maybe still even, are good at their use a little too well, and then they get categorized as invasives. But I think a big misconception is that all invasives are ugly, and that's not always the case.
No, it's not. In fact, most of our invasives have been brought in as ornamental nursery plants. You just look at the Callery pear or the Bradford pear, whatever you want to call it. And, it is a very pretty tree. It has a nice lollipop shape that people seem to like, and it has bright white flowers in the spring. Now, it doesn't smell very good. It's very weak wooded, and it's not necessarily a very good tree. But the biggest problem is that it's a really fast grower. And even though they said that it was a sterile tree, we all know that nature finds a way. And there's no such thing as a sterile plant in the long term, especially when you're talking trees. You go back through the history of the Callery pear, and what they were looking for is a fire blight resistant species that could be bred with the European pears that we have for fruit production. And so, that's why they initially brought it over. So it had a good purpose. And the landscape company said, wow, this is really pretty and it's really easy to produce. So we're going to sell lots of it. And unfortunately, it's not happy.
Yeah. And, when we talk about ways that plants can reproduce, it's, most of the flowers are male and female. They don't require two species or two plants to cross. Sometimes they do, but a lot of times they don't. And then there's also vegetative propagation that can happen. And
Yeah, that's one of the problems with this particular tree is it crossbred, as many of our pome fruits do. It crossbred with other pears, and those young ones went out and spread all over the place. And so, what we are recommending, we do recognize that the calorie pear is still providing some ecosystem services and providing shade. And so, if you remove a calorie pear, we would like you to replace it with another tree, maybe one that's not such a problem tree. Maybe stick with some of the more native varieties. But do recognize that we're not saying go out and cut down every calorie pear tree you see, although,
no,
that would be glorious to have them all gone at once. It's just not going to happen.
it's a weak tree, so it has very high potential to fall, especially with the strong winds that we were talking about earlier, and cause damage. But if it's sitting at the bottom of your yard, it's far away, you can't even smell it, but you can see it and it looks pretty. At the point where it's kind of out of the way and it's not going to fall on anything. I mean, if you have it growing up against your fence line, you might do some fence repair. Is that worth it? Maybe it is, maybe it's not. But it's interesting that Karen was talking about the fire blight resistance, because calorie pear, if I'm not mistaken, can get a lot of fire blight. Is that correct, Karen? And it can spread to maybe trees that you don't want fire blight. Or am I mistaken there?
I think it really depends on which variety of calorie pear you're ending up with. So the Cleveland Select, the Autumn Blaze, and the Bradford Pear, those are all in the calorie pear family. And some of them are more susceptible to fire blight and some of them are less.
All right. And we did not really want to spend this much time on the calorie pear, but it's okay.
But that's how we go,
It's an interesting topic.
It's like, oh, look, shiny. This is like the ADHD program.
All right. So we have, again, Belmont County Plant Swap coming up on May 8th. Feel free to check the Belmont County Master Gardeners Facebook page for more information. Should be up and coming. Or you can call the extension office and I'll be happy to share some more information with you. But today we did set aside some material to just go over some core pesticide material. It's the season where ODA likes to come out, so Ohio Department of Ag, and we invite them to counties, and we are hosting down in Woodsfield and in Somerton. That's going to be in April. So give me a call if you're listening to this show before then. To get your private pesticide license in the state of Ohio, you basically have to pass the core, which is general safety, reading the label, pest management principles, but you also have to get one category as well as core. All right, so some of the overview of things that you should probably know about core when you are studying for a pesticide exam is things like reading and understanding the label. Karen's favorite thing to say is the label's the law, and that's absolutely correct. And the label's the law regardless of whether you're buying something restricted or not. So that one is true in all circumstances. Obviously, safety is a big deal. That's just good practice for yourself, for the environment, and for others. But even safety from a selfish standpoint is still important. Recognizing environmental hazards and situations. So pest management and pesticide principles, obviously, just how to use it, when to use it. Some of the limitations of using chemicals as a weed control method, if it's an herbicide, it should never be the only thing you do. And most of the time, it should never be the first thing you do either. Applications, equipment, calibration, obviously, that's all important to know how to make those calculations, because those calculation rates and limits are also part of the label. And again, you are liable because it is the law. And the laws, handling, transportation, storage, and disposal, that's also stuff that falls under the core. All really important stuff. Record keeping also becomes part of utilizing a restricted product, but the record keeping is something that I would recommend even if you're using something that's not restricted, because it just shows that you are being responsible, you're being diligent about what you're doing, you're aware of the environment, the date, how much you're applying, and that just shows a little bit more ownership and education as far as if there is an investigation, if something happens, like I said, if you're doing something improperly, you could be at fault, whether it's restricted or not. But by keeping those records, it could demonstrate that you weren't the cause of this because you did it according to the label. By not keeping records, it usually works against you. When you have records, it does show that you are doing things typically in a more responsible format, and that goes a long way with the inspectors. But one of the things that we really kind of start out with when we're talking about core understanding of pesticides are signal words. And usually there's three main ones. There's caution that you're pretty much going to find in all levels of pesticides. Caution is the least worrisome signal word. There's caution, warning, and danger. Mm-hmm. Danger being the most dangerous, appropriately. Warning being in between caution and danger. So when we talk about something that has the word caution in it, these are typically acute toxicity levels. So it's not something chronic. When we talk about carcinogens and exposure to certain chemicals over the long term, those chemicals can have a signal word of caution because we're typically talking about acute toxicity. So if I'm exposed to a little bit, I can get really sick really soon. So if it's going more into that warning danger column, chances are it's probably going to be restricted. But under caution, slightly toxic or relative non-toxic. And that is also, when we say stuff like that, it's also very important to understand that, one, this is going to be acute reactions, illness, oral, dermal, inhalation exposure, eye injury is a big deal, skin irritation. But when we say slightly toxic or relative non-toxic, it means in accordance to the label, right? When we talk about household cleaners and stuff like that, they have labels, and they kind of fall into this category too, where you have to use them by the label. Like Windex. Windex is not necessarily a super hazard product. And some people might disagree with that, but there are things that are much worse than Windex. But if you shouldn't be, washing your hands with Windex or brushing your teeth with Windex, right? That would be an improper use that would cause some toxicity.
Yeah.
So, when we talk about stuff like relatively non-toxic, it means according to the label, not that it's something that you can just bathe in or drink. You don't ever want to do anything against the label.
Right.
But obviously, on the flip side, danger, highly toxic means if there is some kind of exposure, whether it's inhalation, skin contact, whether you ingest it somehow, that means that it's going to cause damage, severe and right away.
Right. And there's also an additional one that is above just danger, and that's danger poison. And that's where you are getting to the lethal dose, which is how they determine if it should fall in the caution, warning, or danger zone. Your lethal dose for something that's danger poison is 50 milligrams or less per kilogram of weight. And so basically what that boils down to is, those little sugar packets that you get at a restaurant where it's individual servings. And let's talk about the artificial sweeteners, because there's usually less in those packets. You take one of those packets and a child, that is more than a lethal dose for a child. So when you think about volume that it takes to cause someone to die, that's where you're getting into that poison range, is when you have that small of a volume for ingestion that can cause poison. But, so danger and poison is highly toxic by any route of entry. That means skin absorption, eye absorption, through your mouth or through your armpits, whatever. That's when you're really in that high toxicity levels. And those are usually going to be restricted chemicals, where your danger means that there's high eye or skin damage concerns and a greater than acute lethal toxicity, which gets you into that less than 50 milligrams per kilogram.
Right. And another big point that kind of gets its own category is a potential for eye injury, because that's kind of a unique situation where maybe if it's a mild skin irritation, it could cause blindness if it hits you in the eye. So When it's high eye damage concerns, it falls into the danger as well.
Yeah, and you also have to think about the formulation of the chemical that you're using. When you're looking at something that is, let's say, an amine formulation, and you're going out to treat a property on a hot summer day, then you have a much higher chance of inhaling that toxic chemical because it is going to aerosolize because of the heat. And so certain chemicals shouldn't be used in certain temperatures and certain weather conditions. So you really have to read that label. I mean, even if it's a chemical you normally use, you should still be reading that label, refreshing yourself as to what needs to be done when you're applying it. And one of the things I always stress to people is it's so important to read that label before you use the chemical, because
Yes.
if you're like out in the field using it and you either A, get nauseous and dizzy, or B, splash some in your eye, it's not really a great time to start reading the precautions and dangers and what you have to do.
And another thing, how are you properly applying it if you didn't read the label?
Yes, this is true.
It's not just a common thing. But here's something really basic. Like, what is a definition of a pesticide? So some of the misconceptions of a pesticide is that it's a man-made chemical that will kill all pests. Another one is an organic chemical that will not harm other animals, plants, or insect species. A product that kills insects only. A pesticide is very broad. An insecticide will kill insects. But the definition of a pesticide is a product of chemical or biological origin that may be used to control, kill, mitigate economically damaging nuisance or hazardous pests. So a pesticide doesn't have to kill necessarily. It can be used to control or mitigate. So, a lot of times when we talk about germination inhibitors, those are just preventing the seeds from germinating. Sometimes you have things like growth regulators where you're not killing an insect, you're just preventing it from maturing for reproductive purposes. So it doesn't necessarily kill. And pesticide is a very broad definition of many types. So that is kind of the misconception and the true definition of a pesticide. Another important thing to talk about is, what is a pesticide label, right? It's not the sticker stating the price of the product. It's not a piece of paper containing the product name and promotional information. And it's not the rebate and the guarantee information. The label will be marked as product label. It'll have an EPA number, and it goes over proper use. It'll tell you what you can use it on, what it will control, when you can use it, and it'll also give you the rate. So usually there's a little booklet attached to the container, and it's within that booklet. And that booklet sometimes is hard to read, but it does contain all the information. And what you can do is you can always take that EPA registration number on the bottle itself and get a digital label so you can look at it, so you can read it better. If you want to print it out in larger print to kind of go over it, especially if it's a new product, the damage that can happen with improper use of a chemical, whether it's off-site targeting, drift, or you just use too much, or sometimes you use too little and it doesn't kill the pests that you're actually trying to control, because you might have different rates for different pests. That can save you a lot of time, can save you a lot of headache, can save you money, and it can save you a lawsuit by improper use. So yeah, don't ever get caught in a situation where you haven't read the label at all and you're using a product.
Right. And the most important thing it can save you from is a trip to the hospital. So let's all make sure that we're taking the proper precautions. And, even before you buy that chemical, you go to the store, you're looking through the labels, you're like, oh my gosh, this thing is like 20 pages long and it's microscopic. Write down the name of that chemical. See if you can get the EPA number off of that chemical so you know the exact formulation. And then go home and look it up online, download a readable copy, and sit in an easy chair with a nice drink and read that label before you even buy it. So that way is it going to target the pest that you want to target? Can you use it in the location that you want to use it? Like, not all products can be used on edible food crops. Do you have the right application equipment? How is it supposed to be applied? And also can find out how much you're going to need. You want to buy the smallest container that you can get away with because you don't want a bunch of old chemicals sitting around in your garage, right?
That's absolutely true.
And you also want to buy the least toxic option that's available to do the job.
Right. That very important. And if you buy the product because you think it's right, before you open it, read the label, make sure it's right. And if it's not, go back and exchange it for something else. You don't have to necessarily make 2 trips out of it, but it is important to make sure that you don't open it until you know how to use it. And you only open it when you are going to use it.
That's right. Yeah. And you want to make sure that you know what you're working with and make sure that it targets the pest you're trying to control, and make sure it's the right time of year for that application. If you're trying to apply a pre-emergent crabgrass control in May, you're too late. It's not going to do anything but waste your money and put an extra chemical in the ground that doesn't need to be there. And so you want to make sure that you're applying it at the right time of year. So you have to identify your pest, and your local extension office can help you. There's a lot of apps out there that will try to identify plants, but they're not 100%. So keep that in mind. I mean, even humans that are specialized in these things aren't 100%, especially when it comes to identifying grasses. That is so painful. But when you're buying your chemical, there are things you also want to consider, like what are the active ingredients? You need to know what that chemical is that you're applying. What are the inert ingredients? Are there things in there that are going to help it to stay on the plant or to spread it more thoroughly over the leaves? Or do you need to add, say, an adjuvant to have that chemical work properly? Can it cause phytotoxicity on the plant? So what that means is that when you spray it on the leaves, that it can cause damage simply from the sun shining on it and burn your leaves.
Or just some chemicals will alter the color a little bit, will bleach the leaves a bit, not necessarily kill your plant, but if you're trying to sell it, right, that's a problem.
Yeah.
But, if it's something in the landscape and it'll rebound out of it, then it's probably not a problem. So it's situational as well.
Yeah. And also think about what other chemicals do you need to use? Because in an effort to save time, we'll just put everything in one container and spray it all at once. But if the chemicals are not compatible to be mixed, then you could be creating a chemical that's going to kill everything you're trying to grow. You could be clogging up your spray nozzle because you're getting some precipitate out of it. There's a lot of things that can happen. And so if you're trying to mix 2 chemicals together before application, you want to make sure that they are compatible with one another. So again, this is an opportunity. You can find information about it on the web. If you are not an internet person, call a local service provider and ask for help.
And if you want to get the most accurate information about compatibility of 2 chemicals, the label will tell you. I find that if I have questions about the label or I can't find something, or even if the label is unclear to me, there are usually reps, people that can help you on that specific product, and they know that specific product. So when you're talking about compatibility of chemicals, first place you look is on the label itself.
Yeah.
But if you can't find it or you still have questions, make sure you ask somebody that with the proper education and authority to give you a good answer. Just like, you can find anything on the internet, but, talking to an extension educator, talking to a label representative, that's where you need to go for those kinds of answers.
Thanks for listening to Extension Calling. This show is a collaboration between OSU Belmont County Extension Educator Dan Lima and WVU Ohio County Extension Agent Karen Cox. If you'd like a transcript of this show, contact us at the office. Also, let us know if you enjoy the show by ranking us on your podcast app.